Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked for Life Fly Fishing. And today I want to talk about buying our first fly rod and what we should be really looking at when we go out to a store to buy something. What I am recommending for beginners is that your first rod should be what we call a combo kit. And a combo kit comes with usually a case, the rod, the reel, the fly line, and also there's usually a leader attached to the fly line. So that's what you normally get with a combo kit. There are also, sometimes you'll see combo kits coming with a selection of flies as well. So first off, let's deal with what kind of combo kit you should buy and at what price range, what you should be looking for. Well, I'm going to quote this roughly in US dollars, and these are approximate values, but they'll give a good indication. Actually, there's basically three price points here in combo kits. Around under $100 or around $100, around $200, and around $300. And in my experience, the $100 ones are the ones that are usually coming with a supply of flies and maybe a few other bits and pieces. And generally speaking, I found them to be next to useless. I would not waste my $100 on one of those kits. You usually get them from department stores. And what I found, the last one I had to work with a beginner had bought one. The rod itself was actually pretty good. I mean, the cork was garbage. The reel seat was pretty, crappy, but it would function. The rod blank itself was not bad, actually. It's surprisingly good. And I could, make a good cast out of it. However, the line and the reel were awful, especially the line. And the line is critical, that you have a good line when you're starting to learn to fly fish. If you have a bad line, it's just going to make your life miserable. So though this looked like a good deal, $100, you got a rod, reel, line, leader, flies, little fly box. Look great. Looks like great value. It isn't. You're better off just forgetting that these exist. Move up to the next one, which is around $200. So what do you get for $200 usually? First off, the rod is usually quite good, perfectly adequate. Secondly, the reels usually are graphite or cast aluminum. Where we get into problems with the reels, and I'll demonstrate them in a minute, is the fit of the reels can cause problems. The lines generally are adequate. I'll use that term. They're not great, but they're adequate. So if you spent $200 on one of these, yeah, you can run into a bit of problems with the reels on occasion, and the line won't be the best. But they do work. You can learn to fly fish. You can catch fish with these rods. So $200 price point. If your budget limits you to that, you're good to go. You're okay. But if you can afford to move up to $300, what you get out of that is a better rod, but not a lot better. But usually it's a little lighter, and it performs a little more crisply. The line is usually way better, and I'll demonstrate what that means in a few minutes. And the reel is usually a step up as well. So the fit and finish on the reel is better. Now, if you look here, you can see I don't have a combo kit in front of me. There's two reasons for that. First, I got rid of all my combo kits when I stopped teaching almost weekly, well, more than weekly. A few days a week I was teaching beginners, so I had a bunch of combo kits. I don't have those anymore because I'm not teaching like that anymore. Also, I didn't want to bring in any combo kits because I didn't really want to promote one manufacturer over another because they're all decent. Every one I put my hands on, I thought has been quite good. So if you go with any of the name brands in fly fishing, like Echo and Redington, Grays, Fenwick, whatever it would be, they all produce decent combo kits. So you're not really worried about the quality. So yes, I could have brought one in to show, but the reality is I don't want to promote one particular manufacturer over another. But I do want to illustrate some of the issues, the difference between the 200 and the 300 price points. I've got two cast reels in front of me. These are my old cast reels. These are generally better quality than you'd even find on the $300 combo kits. But they're good. they're what you get on the $300 kit is still a good reel. What you have problems with the cheaper reels is that the frame gap here, and I'll put this so you can see it. You can see that gap between the frame and the spool. In a decently made reel, that tolerance is quite fine. There's not a lot of room in there. On a cheap reel, there can be an awful lot of room. And what happens is your fly line goes through it. So you can actually get your fly line stuck inside between the frame and the spool. And you can actually nick your fly line. So on the really cheap reels, that gap is huge. And you're forever dealing with your line going through it. Even on the $200 ones, you can find a bit of slop in that gap here. The other thing you get into is all these reels have disc drags, but one of the problems you get into with the cheaper reels is the disc drags are marginal. Really, they're only good for preventing overspooling, so if you yank a line off the reel, it doesn't turn into a bird's nest like a bait casting reel would. So the drags really don't do much beyond that. I mean, I had the misfortune of hooking onto a 15-pound carp with one of these cheap reels. I was fishing for smallmouth, and I just used one of my teaching reels, and it basically almost burned the drag out. The reel heated up so much I couldn't turn the reel hardly to retrieve the fish. So there's penalties to be paid for going really cheap with the reels if you're after big species. But for average resident trout, panfish, smallmouth bass, small pike, walleye, any of those species, those cheap drags have worked just fine, and you don't have any problems with them. When you go up to $300, the reels have finer tolerances, the disc drags are better, and the construction is usually better. People with the cheap reels have actually had them literally fall apart. They're reeling in a fish, and all of a sudden the spool just falls off. Things like that, because the fittings, when you get into these spool releases, the spool releaser can be kind of garbagey and easy to come apart. Screw falls out, the reel falls apart, or the drag suddenly goes, the drag knob comes off, and all your drag bits are in the river. So when you're looking at those cheaper reels, you can get into some issues there. Now let's get into the fly lines, because for me that's the critical part of this whole business. If you have a garbage fly line on your combo kit, it's going to make your life miserable when you're trying to learn to cast. And what I'm talking about with cheap fly lines, well, the worst one I've seen, the fly line itself was only about 45 foot long. And then after that, you're into the backing. So if you made a cast longer than 40 feet, you're dealing with the actual backing in your hands, which will tangle very easily, get damaged very easily, get dirty, the idea of having a fly line that was so short was ridiculous. It was basically just the head of the fly line, because fly lines have a head and they have running line. It was just the head of the fly line. There was no running line. And that was one of those $100 units. It was the line was a waste of money. And these companies tend to go cheap on the line because lines are expensive. So that's the reason why that's where your savings was. Garbage reel and the garbage line. Now, when you move up, and this one here is a typical of the type of line you will find in a $200 rig. It's an 80-foot long line, so it's perfectly adequate in terms of length, and there's backing on the reel, so that's good. It's all one color, as you can see. There is no second color in there. Everything is that green color, chartreuse green. And the heads on these and the tapers are most generic, and the heads are often not very long, 35 feet being typical. And the weights are typical as well. There's nothing in particular about that. So the issue for you as a beginner when you're working with a line like that, it is perfectly adequate for shorter distances. It's perfectly adequate for typical trout fishing. And depending on the fly you're using, you can get away with doing some smallmouth and walleye fishing with it as well. You try to do anything else with it, and you start to run into the limits of the line. But where the bigger problems come in is how they've manage the end of the fly line and where they've attached the leader. They actually nail knot the leader directly to the fly line. And so one of the first things beginners wreck when they get into fly fishing is the leader. And your leader is attached to your fly line, is knotted. So when you need to change your leader, what do? Well, don't cut off the leader. Don't cut that knot away. Leave it. What you do instead, you cut off about, I would say about that much of your leader, 6, 8, 10 inches of the leader. Cut that off, throw it away. Keep the fly line and about that 10 inches of leader. And then now what you're going to do is put a perfection loop at the end of that leader. And now you can loop-to-loop connect your leaders. So you can buy a new leader that has a loop already on it, and you can loop-to-loop connect, so you can continually change your leaders over and over and over again. So as you wreck a leader, you can put a new one on. And this piece remains permanently attached to your line all of the time. So to recap that, when you get a $200 setup, you don't have loops on the end of the fly lines. It's a generic head, 80 foot long, no color changes. And it also, I find too, can sometimes be a little wavy or kinky in the memory of the fly line. It seems the cores on them are often not that great. So when they've been on the reel for a while, when you cast them, they can come off like a slinky, or they can get all these bumps and waves, which can impact the smoothness of your cast. So there are some downsides to them. And the other thing too I find is, depending on the brand, they can crack easy too. The coatings on them are marginal. When you move up to the $300 class, what you're getting, first off, you're getting factory loops. You can see this welded loop on the end of this fly line. So this fly line comes with the loop already, so you can loop-to-loop your leaders directly to the fly line. That's ideal. Another thing is, and we should be able to see this, you can see there's a color change in there. And color changes are important for a variety of reasons. With airflow, it's actually a change of material. So they designed the line to behave differently depending on how much you have out. It's also an indicator where the end of the head is as well. So in polyvinyl chloride lines, they just put a dye in which indicates where the end of the head is. That's very, very handy to know when you're learning to cast, because the line will behave differently when the entire head is out versus when some of the head is still in the guides or even still on the reel. So knowing where the end of the head is very good, and that color change will tell you where the end of the head is. The durability of the line will be higher. They'll be less susceptible to cracking. With the polyvinyl chloride lines, the quality of the coatings are better. With airflow, it's polyurethane, so that's not an issue. But this is an airflow line. But the reality is, everything about the line is better. The taper is better. It's the type of usable taper that we find in a lot of our fishing. So the taper is more like 38 to 40 feet long, the whole head, I should say. The front tapers are a little bit more usable. So you get smoother turnover, you get better presentation. And the lines come off the reel straighter with less of that wiggly, wavy business. And so they just simply cast smoother. So they last longer, they cast smoother, and they're more effective fishing tools. As I say, also the reels tend to have better tolerances. So you're less risk of damaging your fly line on the reel when you pull it through the gap between the spool and the frame. The last thing is, what line weight and what length should you buy? Well, that depends on your fishing. I would say if you're going to be doing a mix of trout and smallmouth, and you're dealing with rivers of average typical size, maybe 50 feet to 100 foot wide, a 9-foot 5-weight is going to do the job just lovely. If you are going to be doing just bass fishing and maybe some walleye fishing, go up to a 9-foot 6-weight. If you're looking at largemouth bass, pike, carp, Atlantic salmon, steelhead, go up to the 8-weight, the 9-foot 8-weight. At the bottom end, usually they have either an 8.5 or an 8-foot 4-weight. Those would be small creek solutions, where the creek is anywhere from, say 20 feet to 50 feet wide. The smaller, shorter rods work better. So depending on the brand, it could be an 8.5 4-weight or it could be an 8-foot 4-weight. So that would be the type of rod if you would buy for trout fishing or even smallmouth fishing for that matter in small creeks. But generally, when you look at these combo kits, they come with a 4-weight, a 5-weight, a 6-weight, and 8-weight. Those are your only choices. So it depends on your fishing and it depends on the size of your river. So to wrap this up, essentially when you go to buy a combo kit, unless you have no money and $100 is the most you can afford, forget the $100 rigs. You're just going to be disappointed. 200 are perfectly fine. They come with some limitations, but they're perfectly fine, and you could fish for the rest of your life with a $200 rig. Just remember the trick of, putting a perfection loop on the what's left of the leader when you wreck your first leader, which will happen fairly quickly. It's the first thing people usually screw up. If you can afford it, move up to the 300, and you can definitely fish that for many, many years and do quite well with it. So if you're looking to buy your first fly rod, look at the combo kits and buy the best combo kit you can afford, and you'll be happy with it. So get yourself a kit, get out there and get fishing. Cheers.